Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ignite. Today, I'm really excited to be here with Federico Charosky of Quorum Cyber. Federico, welcome.
Thank you very much, Karen. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks so much for joining us. We're really excited to hear your story. So, Federico, just to kick things off, could you tell us a little bit about Quorum Cyber?
Sure. The vision of Quorum Cyber is simple. We just wanted companies to be able to get on with their lives without being afraid of cybersecurity incidents. So we describe ourselves as a threat management company. We specialize particularly in what we call incident response, which is showing up to an organization's worst days when they're getting breached or under attack. We call that our Tuesday. And then we have a collection of additional managed security services designed to ideally prevent or protect organizations from ever getting to that day. Particularly big with Microsoft. So we're Microsoft's leading security partner, certainly in the UK and North America, and trying to claim that title now globally as we continue our expansion.
Fantastic. Such important work at this time where massive, massive
It's
issues.
been fun. It's been fun.
So I want to hear a lot more about that, but I'd love to just start at the beginning. So can you tell us a little bit about where you're from? Where did you go to school? And kind of when you were young, what did you like to do? What were you interested in?
It's actually more relevant than you might think, but it took me a couple of years to figure that out. So I'm born and raised in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. I spent most of my life there until my almost 30s. And I was a relatively atypical Argentinian kid in that I'm vegetarian and I don't like football. So, and I wasn't vegetarian always, but I think I always had that tendency. But it did mean I didn't have a lot of friends growing up. I wasn't the kind of jovial social kid at all. I was quite shy, quite geeky, most likely in the spectrum, albeit never officially diagnosed. So it did mean that I had an interesting job. I was particularly didn't have a great school experience. I went to a great middle class kind of private Argentina school. So my dad was a doctor, but medical doctor in Argentina, so not what a doctor would be in America. So very very normal. My mom was a philosophy and literature teacher who ended up running her own seamstress business, and that's kind of how my family paid the bills. So I had an early example of entrepreneurship around me from, even though I never saw it as that until much later in life. But it put all that together, and I had a relatively not great kind of primary school. Secondary school, I was very bullied. I was an easy target. I was the typical guy that liked X-Files more than Maradona, and that was just a massive bullseye in my back. So I hid in computers. We had a Commodore 64. Most of everybody listening to this won't know what that meant, but it's pre-internet days, pre-modems, pre all of that, and I just hid there. I was doing a little bit of programming when I was at around 8 or 9, just learning my basics through, and it was weird, right? Because there are no resources available, so you're kind of finding your own way through that tunnel. And then that started evolving, and I was just lucky that as my interest started to develop, an industry grew around them. And there's something in the milk in Argentina because there's a whole collection of companies in cybersecurity that started in Argentina in the 90s. Companies like Core Security and even some of the big firms like Deloitte, which was one of my big first jobs, built a center of excellence for cybersecurity in Argentina in the noughties. So for some reason, they had an inspired partner, Jesus Esteves, who grabbed a couple of teenagers and put us in a room in Deloitte and made us hack the world from there. And that's kind of what gave me one of my interests into the career.
Super interesting. And just if there's anybody on here that kind of isn't quite sure what the word cybersecurity actually means, can you just give us a little bit of like, what does it actually mean?
Well, it means a million things, which is partly one of the challenges. As the opportunity for bad people to do bad things using the internet and the digital economy starts to grow, this discipline of cybersecurity started to emerge, which was the counteract, is the counterbalance to that threat. So in the same way that people used to steal money from a bank, now they can steal money from a company digitally. Well, cybersecurity is the discipline that applies all that craft to trying to protect organizations or people or nations even from all the different attack paths that can take space or can take shape in the digital space. I don't know if that made it any clearer.
Yes.
Hopefully it did.
Basically stopping bad guys from doing bad stuff on the internet.
Roughly, yes.
Let's go back a little bit in terms of, so you were a teenager in your bedroom late at night hacking away, and then did you study?
Allegedly. allegedly.
Did you then study this? Did you go to university? What
Yeah, I
happened?
did. Interestingly enough, Argentina had a what you would equivalent here to a master's. It was an engineering degree on information systems. This is as good as it got at the time, which was a 5 year degree, Monday to Saturday, in a very non-typical UK fashion. And in Argentina, it's very typical that you study and you work at the same time. So I was very lucky that I was able to just do university for the first 2 years of the five. So I was able to go in the morning and then have afternoons relatively free. And I did some work and but nothing too intense. And then years kind of 2.5 onwards, I had a regular 9 to 5 job, and then I went to uni at night, and it was a 6 to 11 p.m. at night university, and then you went home and had dinner, and then you did it all over again. So I started engineering, graduated, and because of that, there's some advantages, right? By the time I graduated with an engineering degree, here's a master's degree, I had 4 or 5 years of work experience in Deloitte, right? So age 22, graduating with now a couple of years of experience, senior consultant and the degree, I was able to compete in the European or American market a little bit ahead of where other people that age were. So that was really useful.
What's your connection to Scotland?
I was working for a technology company. So I did 5 years of Deloitte in Argentina, working across Americas, and then I could either go on the partner route and kind of continue that route, or I wanted to finalize honing my technical skills, acknowledging that I was never going to be the hacker god that I wanted to be, and I'd worked with people that were 10 times smarter. I knew what it took, but I really still had an itch to scratch where I wanted to go a little bit deeper before I went into more consultative world. So I ended up working with a company called Core Security Technologies that was really cool in creating some exploit development and security consulting. Through that work, I worked a lot in North America, and one of the uh, your favorite search engine was one of the companies that I was working for. And in California, I had a choice. So they offered me a job to stay in California and work for them and potentially and do something super cool, or this random guy that I met in a course that we were doing together, who was a contractor for the Royal Bank of Scotland, and we met in Colorado doing a course together, was opening his own startup in Edinburgh. I couldn't even place Edinburgh in a map. And he said, "Would you like to do it with me?" And I had California and Google, really wonder startup in a country I couldn't place in a map at the time, and I chose that path. So in 2010, I moved to Scotland to start that first business, a company called Vacta that did really well. So, and I stayed with a company that bought us for a couple of years before moving then to the Middle East. So my original link with Scotland, completely and utterly random. I just fell in love with it the second I landed. So when I had a second chance to build now Quorum Cyber, my own startup, I came back to Scotland to do it because I think it's one of the best countries in the world.
Amazing. And so interesting how those random opportunities, right? If you weren't in that room in
So
Colorado with that
freaky.
person, your life would be so different.
And look, I don't have a lot of wisdom to share, right? I can only share how it felt from this seat, and hopefully something can take it, whatever resonates with them. I wouldn't consider this a truth, but those paths that are the hardest and the most ridiculous are usually the best ones to follow for some, or at least in my experience, that's the way to go. If it's too easy, it's not the way forward. It's something else take the hard path. It's always more.
Fantastic. I couldn't agree more. So you said you went and joined a friend in their startup. When did Quorum Cyber begin? What's the story there?
So that startup was in 2010. We sold the company in 2012. I stayed with a company that bought us for 2 years. And in 2014, once that company was going in its own direction, I went to the Middle East, where I became head of security for a bank. And that was the first time I had a job. And it was super interesting experience, right? Working for a board, reporting on all the things that I used to consult and build on. Had my kids in the Middle East. And then when the 2 year mark came, we started looking at, do we see ourselves here forever? And the answer was no. And I had this debt, right? So I'd done somebody else's startup. I'd done a startup with somebody else, but it wasn't fully mine. I was really young. I learned a ton of lessons. I was taken advantage of. I collected so many scars to that moment. I had a deck of cards I didn't know how to play. So I had this debt to myself that at some point I wanted to go at it again. But I couldn't even articulate it like that at the time. But then as I started scouting for what's the next adventure, and half of me wanted to keep going further east, Hong Kong, Singapore, do something like that. I was in the corporate ladder again, so I thought it would be logical for me to be CISO somewhere. And this opportunity presented itself where friends from Scotland said, well, look, we had built this technology company for years that's done really well. we wanted to fund a security company, but we had nobody to run it for us. Why don't you come in and do it? And so I had these two incredible guys that were able to kind of give me the push and help me with a little bit of the first couple of years worth of access to some customers, access to debt funding that I used to grow the company. So it just felt like an incredible opportunity that enabled me to come back to Scotland to do it now under my own terms, but not alone, with friends, not in the company, but close to the company, so that I wasn't completely alone. And that it just felt like an incredible opportunity that was too good to pass. Again, easier path would have been to follow CISO role in Middle East, which pays you a fortune and it's tax free and all that, or you can come back to do a second startup in Scotland with now twin boys aged 1.5 at the time. So it felt like that was the difficult path.
Why take the easy path, right? Much more fun.
Indeed.
I feel like a lot of your opportunities came from people that you happen to meet and networks and connections. And so I think that for me is an interesting point around, we meet all these people in our lives, and at that moment you don't necessarily know what you're going to do, but it all adds up. And so
Look, my dad was a hoarder of almost anything you can think of, right? Pens and pictures and gadgets, and like he loved. I think I've been a hoarder unintentionally of those connections, and I never knew what to do with them or but there was this intuition that in the end it's the people that around you, the people that you connect, and that matchmaking, whether for yourself or somebody else, that can really make some magic happen.
fantastic. So in those early days, you moved with twin boys to a new country, a country you'd lived in, but you hadn't, wasn't your country necessarily. What was it like in those early days of building the company?
Ooh, great question. I mean, it's a dark time, right? Because my kids were 2, so they weren't even potty trained, and at the same time, you're having to figure out a startup. So, look, it's probably the most exciting time of my life, and I keep saying this to everybody: don't do this for quality of life, but but the fulfillment that you get through this is just enormous. It was hard, man. It was super hard because at that time, I was doing the work, so I was the only billable asset, if you want. So whatever money came in came from my consulting work delivering to customers, and at the same time you're trying to start to take that revenue and pay yourself, and also try to start building a team around you to be able to scale it. So very, very long days. Again, because I had those friends, I didn't have the anxiety of the first 1 or 2 customers, so they could expose that network to me. Invaluable, and I don't think I would have been here without that. I had my network from before and the customer side service before in Scotland, so it gave me the time to reach out to that and rekindle those relationships and start getting those engagements. But it was this 20-hour a day, 8 hours of working for a customer, and another 5 or 6 hours after that of developing the next customer. That took time. That took time. There's things I would have done different that I became, I'm going to say good at. It sounds too self-aggrandizing. It's not what I mean, but I've developed muscles I never had that are super useful now, particularly in the corporate finance world, where in the raising funds and the working with the money markets in a way to fund startup that I wish I'd done sooner.
So you talked about how you were the first person, everything you were creating was the business and how hard it was. Where is the business today? How big have you built the team? What does it look like?
So today we're north of 400 people. We have offices in Scotland and London and the US, in Dubai. We've done 2 acquisitions. We've done 3 rounds of funding. So it's grown logarithmically, not even exponentially. But a lot of that started with that funding, right? So we were from years 1 to 3, 3 and a bit. It was hard. It was the hard yards, right? A person, a couple of months, and we were about probably about 30 people or less in December 19. Little did we know that the world would go crazy in March 2020, and the pandemic was in. So I was very lucky, and again, I cannot stress how many times this company survived or thrived through luck, and I think it's something everybody needs to acknowledge. So many times it's out of your hands. We were having all the conversations with investors just before the world closed down, and we closed the first investment deal in June 2020, all through Zoom, in a way that I don't think many of my peers or competitors even had that access. So by the time everybody else was furloughing people and figuring out how to survive pandemic, I was fully freshly capitalized. And so we managed to take that moment and really boom. So the next 18 months, we tripled the business. We went to 90 people, and we delivered an investment plan that would have been a 4 or 5 year investment plan in 18 months. So from June 2020, where we did that first investment with a company called Maven in Scotland, uh, we took it to 90 people in December 21, and we did a second investment where a mid-market UK private equity firm called Livenbridge became our majority investor and replaced Maven in the cap table. We used Livenbridge Capital to grow from kind of December 21 until May 24, where we now were 250 people operating primarily across UK, but with a little bit of a footprint in the US. And we closed our third investment now with a company called Charlesbank, which is our current majority partner. And immediately after that was May 24, we did two acquisitions. And that brought between those two about another 150 people across US and Canada. And now we're deep in the belly of integration. So
What a journey.
it's been fun.
That is in such a short time period, actually, when you think about it, um,
Yeah, it's very heavy at the end, right? So, right, but when I'm kind of advising others that are considering that journey, I think I would have enjoyed partnering with somebody that had some of those money markets experience earlier to unleash the growth potential of what we could have done. How much bigger could we have been today had we done that early? Is a question that I will hold.
and often, you go in those early days and you just have to figure it out all for yourself. But sometimes maybe recognizing that earlier and asking for help and
Totally.
bringing in people who can support you and thinking, who do I know that knows these things and how do we do stuff together?
You know what? That's something that I've also learned is super culturally dependent, right? I think Scotland, for all the goodness that it has, it's missing the growth spirit. There's a shame about success that is endemic to Scottish culture. And whereas if you go to America, success is almost it's a religious figure. People celebrate other people that are successful. I think that's partly the reason that businesses just grow more fertile there. And I think there's something there where we need to change the way we behave about success and risk, because that's how we miss out.
And you are speaking right now to the potential future entrepreneurs of Scotland. So, are there things that you would recommend that they do to help get them more comfortable with that? What kind of advice would you get them, to would you give them to help them change that?
But I think if you really want to do this, you probably have to have a little bit of that weirdness in you where everybody else goes, no, I'll take that job at RBS because I think that's their future. And you go, no, not for me. And I'm going to try something different and not be afraid to try that. I think there's something there where you need to authentically look at yourself and understand if that's you. But the one thing you need to do is be able to be comfortable with uncertainty and not just be comfortable, but actually thrive in it. Don't forget that this has to electrify you. And if it doesn't, either you partner that in or you acknowledge that this is not for you. And that's also okay. So not everybody should be doing this because it is hard and you need a team and you need backup and you need to have a resilience.
Absolutely. And I think what you say there about the passion and the electrifying is so important because I think a lot of times, sometimes people think, well, I'm going to go in to do this because I want to make a lot of money, actually. But you have to love the thing that you're doing because that's what's going to push you through and that's what's going to drive you through. I always think also, when you're very young in high school, like the folks listening, what are the things that you can do that actually it's okay, it's kind of safe to fail then, so you can
Mm-hmm.
get used to failing then. So I'm just curious, and then that builds the muscle of failure that is kind of okay
Yeah.
to take those risks. So I'm just curious because we look at someone like you who's had this massive success, or at least I view it as massive success. You're
Thank
probably
you. I'll
not
take
yet.
it.
You're probably
It's
like, no, no,
nothing.
like
This we're
more.
just getting started.
Exactly, but I view it as massive success. But, so it's very easy to look and say, "Oh, that's great. He hasn't failed." He therefore has that. Are there moments where actually you have failed and things haven't worked out the way that you want? And how did you deal with them?
Massive moments, like yeah, massive moments. First of all, the first startup was a collection of lessons learned that really scarred me, right? So there were friendships that betrayed me. There were none of the objectives that I set out to accomplish were accomplished. I didn't achieve any form of financial independence. I didn't achieve any form of. We didn't build a dream that we were aiming to dream. That we were dreaming while we were building it. I really suffered through some of those moments. Before that, the last job I had in Argentina, which was the technical company I was talking about, and I was surrounded by some really great technical minds. I learned as well that A players don't tend to be the best team players, and I put myself in a position as an adult where I was bullied again, and I was really ashamed of how did I not learn these lessons when I was 10, 11, 12, and in my 20s I put myself in a position again where I'm being bullied, and it really affected me. So I think the collection of those moments were not particularly enjoyable, and And that's okay, because that is ultimately how you become more resilient. And I think resilience isn't just something you train, it's the resilience is something you earn through having done hard things and pushing through them anyway and coming on the other side and hopefully being that just 1% better or more prepared or more or wiser because of those bad experiences. So would Quorum Cyber have been successful without my bullying experience in Argentina, my bullying experience as a kid, and kind of our monthly billing payment when I was growing up, and my mom billing that shop dinner? Probably not, right? Because all of those little things are the things that built me up to being able to survive the hard parts of this. And there were some nights that were horrible in Quorum Cyber, right? There were really nerve-ending. Should we just wind it now? Nights, and I think the ability we've had to be able to grit our teeth and push through is there because of all those little things that came before it.
I think that's so important. And I think that's such an important lesson in there also though about how you every experience you have builds you up, right? So if you're
Totally,
going out there doing
totally.
lots of different things, trying lots of stuff, sometimes you'll be successful, sometimes you won't. All of it will add up, and that's how you're going to build that resilience and that's how you're going to build that strength. So just final question. If there's folks out there sitting in a high school classroom, what do you wish you knew then that you know now that can be advice for them or guidance for them?
The probably the biggest thing was there isn't a collection of knowledge that is forbidden that you don't have access to that would teach you how to do this. So I had this idea that there was a whole collection of bodies of knowledge that is reserved for certain careers or certain groups of influence or certain special. It doesn't exist. We don't have a clue what we're doing. None of us. We haven't been given a manual that you've been cheated out of. I had no economic advantage of opportunity. I wasn't born into any form of wealth. I'm Argentinian. Trust me, we don't have anything. And I was able to carve this out because those perceptions of blockers are within our own mind. They do not exist. Is it possible to have advantages and unfair advantages? Probably, but you can still do this without any of them. And that if I'd known that earlier, I probably would have been a little bit more bullish about well, I'll try it anyway. And it might not work, and it probably won't work, but I'll learn from that, and then I'll try again. So that would be the one piece of advice is don't think that there's this collection of things that others have access to that would make it's not there. Nobody has a clue. We're all doing the best we can and just figuring it out. And bite a little bit more that you can chew always and just go at it and you'll be fine. And if nothing else, you'll learn something you didn't know before you tried.
Completely. I actually think that's good advice just for life in general, not even entrepreneurship. I think sometimes when you're young, you look at adults and you think that they have it all figured out. The truth is we're all just making it up every day,
You have no clue.
asking lots of questions,
It's
trying
all
to
a
figure
Ponzi
stuff out.
scheme. It's all a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, everybody is just trying to figure stuff out every single day and just kind of move forward a little bit, learn a little bit, move forward a little bit. Fantastic. Federico, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Such brilliant insight. Your story is fantastic, and I am incredibly excited to see where Quorum Cyber goes next.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.